So good morning, everyone. While we give it a minute or two for everyone to join, just a few housekeeping rules. If you have questions during the session, please feel free to drop them in the Q&A panel here in Zoom. We will have a dedicated Q&A session right at the end of our webinar. Also, this session is being recorded. We will send the replay right after the event. Now, this panel is brought to you by Panopto, a video management platform that transforms your organization's training and expertise into instantly searchable, reusable knowledge. I am Inna Horvat, a senior learning strategist at Panopto, and thrilled to be here with you today and explore something that's fundamentally reshaping our profession. Now, I know that some of you might be thinking when you see that title, are they saying courses are bad? Training is that? No, that's not what we are saying at all, but we are saying this: the world of work has changed drastically and it will continue to change. Learning now happens and it is expected to happen in the flow of work and not just with courses. We need to evolve of how our systems support both structured learning and just-in-time access. So today we are going to explore that with the help of some incredible practitioners who are living this transformation every day. And with that, let me take a moment to warmly welcome our panelists. I'm so happy to see you all, Jillian, Bill, and Katie. You can connect with each of them using the contact information displayed on this screen. So Katie, would you mind getting us started and introduce yourself?
It would be my pleasure. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time it is for you. My name is Katie Campbell, and I drive leadership development, succession planning, and employee engagement plus learning initiatives that build the workforce of the future for a Fortune 1000 data services company. And I am so excited to be here and to join Bill, Jillian, and Inna as part of this discussion. Thank you.
Thanks, Katie. Bill, would you?
Sure. Dr. Bill Sodeman. I am a Focal Point certified business coach, and I also run my own corporate learning and development advisory services. I'm focused on helping organizations earn more revenue through better employee engagement and retention.
Brilliant. Jillian.
Yes, I'm Jillian Moulton. I am the VP of People at Fabric. Fabric is a health tech company, but in my career, I have been CHRO or head of HR of a lot of software tech companies who often are scaling really quickly. And so learning and development is a big part of getting in front of kind of how you grow and how fast you grow, and oftentimes doing it with a pretty lean team on the HR side.
Lovely. So I think all the audience can relate to the point I made earlier, that our experts are bringing tremendous experience to the tables. That's why I'm so excited to be with you all here today. Now, let me cover briefly our roadmap. So we are going to move through three big sections. So first, the identity shift. Who are we as L&D professionals right now? Are we content creators? Are we change managers? Are we knowledge enablers? So second goes the architecture of access. How do we actually build systems where knowledge flows in the flow of work? Lastly, third, the smarter impact. So how do we measure what actually matters instead of just what's easy to measure? That's the case for many companies, and that's okay. We'll cover the reasons a bit later. Now, then we'll finish up with the Q&A session, because I guarantee you would have questions and probably some strong opinions. However, before we dive into the panel discussion, I would love to hear from you first. So right now, you're going to see the poll. Could you confirm, please, that it's on the screen right now? So is your learning strategy designed around courses or around access? Pick the option closest to your reality. Or drop your response into the chat in case you have a different situation. We would be thrilled to find out your perspective and actual situation happening in your organization right now. And while we are waiting for the replies to settle, the results I can already see are quite intriguing. So while we are waiting, actually today when I was preparing for the session, a quote came to my mind, is by W. Edwards Deming, and he stated that every system is perfectly designed to get the result it gets. So if it's course-centric, that's by design, not failure to focus mostly on training than access. So the question is that we would cover later, are those still the results that we need? So what is the system of the future learning and development look like? that's why we are having Jillian, Bill, and Katie here share their perspective. Lovely. So Jillian, Bill, and Katie, what are your thoughts?
If I had been able to vote, I would have picked the top choice as well.
That's all.
Yeah, I would, if I would have voted, I would be the balance of both.
Yes.
Because like the desire to be custom is a real balance.
Yes.
And if I were voting, I previously was a chief learning officer for a large nonprofit. I would have picked number 3 as well. Balance is tough, but that's what we were being asked to do.
Absolutely.
Yep.
And I love that we've covered so what our audience thinks of the topic in general. And we are free to move to the first block of our discussion, which is identity shift. So let's dive into the first very big question. Who are we as L&D professionals, in your opinion? Are we content creators, change managers, or knowledge enablers? Can we look a bit into the future, and how would that profession look in a couple of years? What should we focus on?
I can step in here. I think when I think about, and this might be coming from my lens of, being, owning all of HR and it being a part of it, is that definitely we are growth enablers. Like L&D is your forward thinking, right? It's your forward proofing. And all investment that when I, go and set my budget and make a case for it, it's always that this will help us do our job better, faster, stronger, and then on different time horizons.
Bill, Katie, what do you think? How does that fit into your organizations? And Bill, you're a consultant, so you might have totally different perspective. Am I right?
Okay. Yeah. I have a running joke. Where I live, I have a hat rack on the wall, and I'm always switching hats, even as a consultant. Sometimes I'm asked to do content creation. Sometimes I'm asked for advice on change management. Sometimes it's KM and enablement. And, sometimes it's, as Jillian said, growth focused. We have to, as a consultant, I have to be pretty flexible, but I'm seeing more organizations having to be agile in terms of learning and development and how they craft and deliver.
I think that's a great analogy, Bill. I was thinking initially when you posed the question, do I have to pick just one? Because generally there's a place for all of those things depending on the use case. And I like being able to shift between them, but also appreciate that, different places might need different things than others. So if it's a required compliance learning, for example, there might just be a one size fits all, and that's for a reason. And in other cases, that doesn't make sense. So it's nice to have the option to be able to pick what suits the situation and will, to Jillian's point, deliver the best result and the most growth and the business results that are all going to, at the end of the day, decide what we get to do.
Absolutely. Thank you for these honest answers. I love that, because when you go on right now on, let's say, LinkedIn, every second post is telling us what to do, who to be. And this is very linear position, right? We are change managers. We are supposed to enable knowledge. We are content creators. So I love that perspective. But right now, I would love to bring us back to the opening poll in terms of, let's cover access a little bit more, right? So do we have a training problem or an access problem? It's a big question. There is lots of dimensions in it, but yeah, Bill, what do you think?
I think part of it's an access problem, and it's also generational. We've got millennials and the follow-on generation who are used to hopping on YouTube and finding answers very quickly. I'm older, but I do the same thing if I need to find out something for my work. It's knowledge on demand. And the course-centric approach doesn't seem to resonate as well with those generations, and the trend's only going to continue.
Right. Especially now with ChatGPT. I have to be honest with you. I had a conversation with a friend of mine who, she's a student, and I tried to send her over some tips on how to use AI. And well, guess what? She knew all of them, right? So, okay, wonderful. Anyone else would want to cover access or training problem?
I think with AI, that's a great example of a situation where just providing content isn't going to cut it. it's not only is the pace of change insane, and so what AI is and how it functions continues to grow and flow, but then on top of it, telling somebody about AI and even telling somebody, for instance, how to build a prompt or whatever, that isn't enough to help
Mhm.
somebody be a really effective AI user, for example. And so, I think there's sometimes where a content creator and maybe having that content available makes sense, and other times where it's not going to do what it needs to do if that's how you approach learning.
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah, I
Absolutely.
would, I would, I would double click on that to some extent. I think we do have an access problem, but I think it's also through the lens of turning us from, well, this is what I have, and this is what you're going to do, to this is what you need, and this is how you get it, and here's the different ways you can get it, right? It's a very much a shifting of focus from like serving, like this is what we serve, to how do we adhere to your customization. That's where AI, I think, can be hugely helpful, is the this is my role, this is where I want to be, this is what I need to do now, this is what I want to do in the future, kind of a
Mhm.
thing. And also tying what the business needs you to learn and grow in with where you want to go from your development. That's
Mhm.
all about access and understanding.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
And when I think of workplace learning, we all know the sad statistics. There are some of the courses that have completion rates of 5%. So,
Ugh.
so much
Oh,
work.
wow.
Yes, I think that's something that seen several weeks ago. There was a really great research. So what I'm trying, what me as a professional would probably expect from my organization is to have a problem and the solution at the time when I face this problem. So why don't I just go online and use my platforms I would use ChatGPT in real life to find a quick solution to my problem. I think that's something that we would normally expect now from every side of our life, right?
Yep.
So when we talked about access, we've had a prep session before, and of course we've mentioned owning access. So who owns knowledge in that aspect in your perspective? I think it's a very even painful question for most of the L&D experts around. So we are talking about L&D department, HR. Sometimes HR owns L&D, right? So is it IT or is it the employee? So what are your thoughts on ownership?
Well, there's definitely a governance issue. I have run into L&D departments that have always had the primary role in helping learners navigate through content and knowledge. And given the multiple entry points that employees, especially the younger generations have, it requires a multifaceted approach.
Mhm.
Um, People aren't going to go through the same door in the mall to get to where they want to go. And
Or even go into the mall anymore.
well, yeah, there's that. There are so many good superstores around. They're going to, I wouldn't say go rogue, but they're going to go through pathways they're familiar with and comfortable with, and that means leaving the walled garden that we've carefully tended in L&D. Um,
I agree.
Yeah, I also think there's like a freedom to that to some extent, especially if we
Mhm.
like looking through the lens of like the AI customization that AI kind of affords us. It gets us a little
Mhm.
bit closer to enablement, but it also gets us a little bit closer to innovation. Like I think one of the things that a lot of L&D is doing is maintaining the content, what
Mhm.
content is still relevant. And that's something that I think won't be something that we worry about so much because one, AI will probably help us with that to some extent.
Mhm.
But it'll also be, we're going to be looking at ways to kind of make it more future forward and make it more customized and like getting closer to your job and your development and what the company needs to you. So yeah, yeah.
I think the place where there's a little bit of struggle with that are in those highly regulated industries. I'm sure you can identify with
Mhm.
that in healthcare.
Yeah.
Certainly, we have that as well. And there's a lot of restrictions placed on what you can do and how you can do it. And so there's also a really important balance there to make sure that all of those regulatory requirements are cared for while providing that flexibility and freedom where we can and where it makes sense.
Yeah, and that's actually kind of speaking to that, like because people are, consumer, usage of like LLMs and Gen AI is so relevant. Like you're going to be dealing with that. Well, yeah, here's my path and here's what you need to do. And they'll be like, cool, I went on ChatGPT and this is what I want to do. And so you're kind of like having to deal with that actively, right? Yeah.
Right. And I loved what Kate, you mentioned about the security and compliance issues. And actually just yesterday I've talked with an L&D lead, and he mentioned that when they were trying to create a course around AI, or just simply create a support system that would enable employees to learn more about AI, they found out, and I think this is classical for many organizations, that there are either active everyday users of AI, or somebody who is anti-AI in the way that, well, compliance, regulatory issues, etc. So there is no middle ground. And I can't stop myself from asking, of course, do you have any thoughts on that? So how do we kind of narrow down these problematics of having very advanced as learners and beginners?
We're living that right now. We're a Google shop, and the way that we get data on their version of AI, which is Gemini, the categories that they give us are high, medium, and low. Google determines the categories. So when we get usage data, it's putting a person into one of those buckets. And to your point, it's very interesting to even try to unravel who is where and what their usage is. But I also heard an interesting perspective as a part of a work group that's trying to work through getting the people, especially in that zero usage category, up into other categories. When people have a bad experience the first time they use it, especially if they weren't really excited about it to begin with, like let's say, for example, you use a prompt and it's not great and you don't get what you expect. Well, then why bother, right? You have that bad first experience and you're not seeing the value. And so unless somebody comes along and helps you understand a different perspective, your perspective is that you don't understand the hype and you had a bad experience.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we have the same. And I think part of that is also taking, and in a way, you'll always have different levels of maturity on learning. But I think one thing that we are doing is who are the power users? How are they using it? What do we want what do we want to make them mavens within the organization, and how do we align
the AI influencers?
Yes, because if you have a bad experience, you need a friend that tells you, no, you got to try it again this way. And the more of that we can get, the better, for sure.
Yeah, the technology is changing so quickly that people who tried AI or an LLM even last month, there may be something new that addresses those issues.
Totally.
But they had their Goldilocks moment. They jumped in. It was too hot. It was too cold, and they don't want to jump back in.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about identity shifts, so it seems like we are also in the stage that we are going to provide support systems, not just to acquire knowledge, but to experiment, and that could be a really great thing. So we've talked about the identity. Now let's talk about architecture. So how do we actually design learning systems that work in the flow of work? And there is a lot of people who talk about, but personally, I find that these are very blurry conversations. We need to enable employees in the flow of their work. We need to provide access when needed. Nonetheless, we still build our learning strategy around courses, not access. In your opinion, how do we in practice design learning systems that work in the flow of work?
Well, microlearnings definitely help. And I find that the organizations that adopted microlearnings have a leg up in shifting from a course focus to an access focus. Especially with the kinds of learning systems that are now available that can help an employee navigate in the walled garden and create their own learning journey. That seems to be the trend that we'll have going forward. It blows up the course model somewhat, but I look at products like LinkedIn Learning, which are very consumable on a micro basis, as a proof that this is what's happening.
And
I like a lot of the AI enablement in places where it makes sense to have AI overlaid on, text, like your call recording or whatever kind of software you're using, to give that just-in-time resource, whatever it might be, knowledge base, micro learning, whatever it is that that person might need to help them in the situation that they find themselves. To me, that's one of the most exciting use cases. Obviously, there's pros and cons to that, because not every use case can have call recording or, that kind of, I don't want to say invasive, but, AI has a lot of information, and that can be good and bad. And so some places it may not make sense for that kind of enablement, but where it does, it's amazing to be able to see how quickly the AI can process what that person is saying and bring them that resource really quickly.
Yeah, when AI is embedded in a tool also that they're already using, or you've decided to switch to, that is the easiest way to get there, right? If your LMS is AI enabled or something like that. And then you can focus more on the early adopters with the kind of more emergent stuff, or kind of like to figure out what's best. But when you already have something and then it gets AI enabled, then you're just training people how to use something that a home that they're comfortable in that now has a new wing, that's the easiest way to do it to some extent.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah, it's kind of like having a smart home. If you present it to someone as, oh, your home's so smart now and this technology is so wonderful, they may get scared about it. But if it's presented more in the way of how it makes their lives easier, then they're more likely to adopt. And that's where I see shifting from courses to more of an access and context piece does make employees and managers' life a lot easier in terms of learning.
Yeah. And then you're just focusing on a lunch and learn with somebody who can like show people how to use it and help people remember that, right? That kind of like live mentorship becomes really important.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right, absolutely. And since we've started talking about AI, and the truth is it hasn't been on our agenda yet, there will be a separate, but it just keeps coming up naturally during our conversation. And it just reminded me of a brief moment in my practice. So 4 years ago, I was an instructional designer. We spent $25,000 on 9 micro-learning videos. Some of them were partly animation, some of them interviews. So a couple of employees left the company even before we managed to launch these videos. That's knowledge lost. But now with AI, I can simply adapt the script, I can regenerate the video, I can do basically everything that a couple of years ago I wouldn't be able to do. So that's my example from just experience of instructional designer, but let's take a look at the broader picture of leadership level. And we will talk a lot about proving L&D efforts, benefits to business, right, side of things. In your opinion, how can we use AI today and maybe in the future to make learning instantly available, contextual, and trusted? Because there is another aspect of, having mistrust into AI amongst the employees.
Well, certainly one thing that helps is getting employees to use the internal LLMs and AI. And this goes back to my previous point about employees going out of the walled garden. We want to encourage them to use the company's systems as much as possible, not only to capture that knowledge, but to measure what employees are interested in and how they're engaging in it.
Yeah, I think.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Great.
We're excited.
I love that.
I was thinking about it also on the kind of like the combination of the human and the AI, which I think it like gets kind of ignored in like the potential of AI, but I still think where it hits best is when you have that. And I think reciprocal mentorship relationships are going to be very, very important to AI, because especially people who are younger in their in their career, but also more technically adopted, like having grown up with more technical adoption, there can be a really great like synergy between an experienced person who's been there for a really long time and can give you the personal experience with the person who knows how to use it. And then they combine to use AI to kind of aggregate frameworks, pull together information. I do think that is the best way to kind of like adopt it, is like the human and AI partnership.
I think it was Gartner that, at least from me where I heard it, coined the term technology as a teammate. And I really like that idea as well, because it's not supposed to replace the person. It's not supposed to be the only thing you use. it's one part of a much greater whole that strengthens the team. And I really like the idea of that. Also, I think it's great to see things like, a lot of people, especially those that might be in the older generations, had a very specific idea of what a career path looked like, for example. And with some of the functionality enabled by AI, it can go back and look at different journeys that people have taken in that company to help make recommendations for people based on what other people have done that might not have been considered before. So, hey, somebody else in this job did this, but they also did this because they have similar skill sets. And I think some of those types of things are really exciting to see as they emerge and continue to become more prevalent, because that will change so many people's lives. If you were a P1, now you have to be a P2 in this thing. No, you don't. You can be whatever you want. And there's a lot of different places you can go with the skills that you have. And here's just a couple of things that you might want to think about. So I'm really excited for those types of applications as well, because there's things that we wouldn't think about or consider naturally in all cases that AI will surface for us.
Fantastic. It seems exciting. I know there is a lot of energy or fear around AI, and it's not without any reason, but I do love that our conversation proves that. And just with following up with what Jillian said, the human in the loop, that's going to be actual for a long time. So last one, Bill, I know that you're passionate about this. So could you tell us why user experience isn't just cosmetic here in terms of architecture of access and just-in-time training?
Yeah, thanks. User experience is crucial. We don't want to make this a painful or cumbersome process. And, I read an article yesterday about a journalist who decided to not use AI for a day, and he was down to using a paper map to get around the city because the AI is enabled in the GPS and the mapping software. Um, so, getting back to the UX, it needs to be um, as easy or even easier than the UX that we provided with legacy systems, so that the employee or the manager doesn't need to think so much about deliberately using AI. They're just using it.
Yeah. Also the amount, like that just makes me think of like the amount of knowledge that like my kids. So I am part of that generation that, we had we didn't have phones in our pockets, right? And now it's everywhere. But it thinks about my kids, there's certain knowledge they won't have to have in their brains, like your home phone number, your all of that stuff. Well, hopefully they'll have that one. But 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 like directions on how to get places,
Yes.
right? Like that is one thing that just from the point of view of learning, if you don't like, that's not something you're going to need. And some people can be like, oh, that's bad. But that means that you have space to learn the next level and the next level and the next level. And that is like hugely fascinating to me. And I'm excited for them. But it's funny when you said that, I was like, yeah, I remember doing that. I remember being in the back
Me
seat with the
too.
necklace. Yes.
Yes.
Right.
But that's a great point. It does give a lot of space and freedom. And, some of those walled gardens need to really be thoughtfully and deliberately pruned to make sure that the knowledge they include is continuingly relevant, as opposed to, like you said, skills that are no longer needed.
Right. An unnecessary but a funny piece of information is that I caught myself on a thought that I was showing off with my skills of navigating Paris. So I told to my friend that I know Paris very well. I have never been lost there once. I've been there several times. Then it crossed my mind that it's just because of the Google Maps. So I don't know if that counts. In any case, we are living through very exciting times, and in L&D, I do feel that a lot of us have thought at least once, I'm asked to do more than I can, more than I have time, more that my role responsibilities state, and that's because learning sometimes becomes chaotic, right? So could AI help us shape the profession in the way that we will finally feel that we are catching up? What do you think?
Great question. This does require a mind shift in how we measure the overall success. With a course-centric approach, it's easy, engagement, completion rates. But AI requires a more agile approach to measurement. We'll always have courses, that for compliance, courses are a great way to make sure that people tick the boxes and get the content, but we can layer on AI on top of that. So when people have a compliance question in the flow of work, they can get an answer to that. And we can also measure that.
Yes.
Yeah, I also think just the time the time sucking activities of learning and development will become easier. Maintenance, discovery, all of that stuff will be highly empowered with this.
Mhm.
And in some ways, like participation, I think will become less of a metric and more in kind of like aggregation and the amount of people that, and then of course, how does it reflect in the job and the performance and things like that, which you can start pulling together with AI, connecting your LMS with your, performance management and being able to really have metrics that kind of where you might have to do it in a spreadsheet now will be like a full loop, like analytical dashboard, which is insane and wonderful.
Love that.
Mhm.
Even needs assessments, trying to
Yes.
figure out what the problem is. And, is this a training problem? The favorite question we all love so much. We, thinking about engagement surveys, even I did a qualitative dissertation for my doctorate, and coding and unpacking all of that took months. Again, before AI, sorry, I know that makes me very sounding old, but it's such a game changer to be able to have all of the commentary analyzed, and even that, what are the needs that aren't stated that we should be thinking about, all the levels that you get from AI analysis that are so incredible. And it takes 10 minutes. Of course, a person has to make sure and validate and actually read through the comments to, confirm the results. But man, it's so much faster. I spent so many months of my life doing all of that not stupid. It was great qualitative analysis, but the time savings is incredible.
Yeah,
Mhm.
just on like what you're talking about, like commentary and sentiment analysis, the
Yes.
amount of like less hallucination you're starting to see in the results of that is
Right.
exciting because I can tell you the
Yes.
amount of time I've gone through, read every commentary, 500 comments, whatever, and I'm like trying to define, from my gut feeling the sentiment.
Yeah.
Like I still want to be there, I still want to get that, but just the ability to
Mhm.
do it in an aggregated way is insane.
Yeah,
And
synthesizing is crucial.
yes.
And I did a qualitative dissertation as well, Katie. We're limited as people. We can only keep 7 to 10 pieces of information in our head. So the ability of AI to synthesize that information and find patterns we normally wouldn't see without having to do crazy amounts of coding or slip into other forms of analysis is crucial.
Right. When I reflect on my journey, I used to be a teacher, transitioned into instructional design, and manager, etc. Now I'm here with Panopto, right? So I do remember the days when I was trying to transition into L&D, and while coding, for was one of the most required skills when I was applying for jobs. And right now, if you take a deeper dive and just analyze instructional design positions, it's rarely stated. So, and that's like been 5 years, maybe a bit more, but the amount of impact AI has already created on a lot of jobs, not just ours, is mind-blowing. It is a little bit scary even.
Mhm.
What I also sense is that so with Jillian, I loved your example on connecting your learning platforms with knowledge performance. And there is just a lot of so much data that we can potentially gather, be able to analyze. Predictive analysis is one is coming to the picture here.
Yes.
But I do know what some of our audience members might be thinking. How close are we here actually to these amazing, incredible tech advancements? How close are we to having half of our jobs, like 50% for sure, getting substituted with AI? So what, in your opinion, how do you feel in your responsibilities? What's the progress? What should we wait for in the next couple of years?
Well, I don't think it'll happen all at once. I mean, it will feel like that once it arrives, right? But I do think it's based on adoption. It's also based on validation. Because remember, the audience for all of this is still humans, right? So we don't want to lose that in that. Like, right? We're not, AI is training itself and he's doing it. But what we're talking now is how do we level up humans with these tools? And I think the interesting thing is we were going back to what we said about the more it's embedded in tools we use today, that is where it will land first and be utilized almost in a non-thoughtful way, right? I think even in like the stage that we're at where we're all using, ChatGPT or Gemini or Claude or whatever to kind of dabble with it is that. And what I find interesting is, I mean, I don't know if this is going to happen. It is ChatGPT going to replace the Google search. That's the kind of big thing now. So we will change our tools, and I think it will be done in almost an integrated way. It feels right now it's getting slammed because we are playing with it kind of like, immaturely, to be honest about it. But I think there will be a day when we look back and go, oh, yeah, it's just life now, right? It's the next evolution. I'm not going to say revolution, but we're getting close to that. Is like, how does it up level us and just become a part of our life? So I don't think will be a day where it'll be like the AI has arrived. I think it will just be us.
Kind of like CDs going out or, any of those types of technologies. It wasn't just, but all of a sudden there's no more CDs.
Yeah. Or the internet. Someone was talking to me.
Yeah.
I was listening to a thing where they just kept saying AI, 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 and it's a very diverse thing, just AI. But I started thinking, okay, every time he says AI, I'm just going to say internet and put myself back in the 90s.
Yes.
There we go. Yeah, there's a lot of parallels with what we saw with workplace internet adoption and workplace AI adoption. At some point, we just wake up and go, people are using AI tools even if they're not really thinking about it, or they're engaging with the technology in a way that moves their learning journey forward.
I love that I invited you to speculate in hopes of, getting enormous attraction for this webinar and, become sort of fortune tellers. But I understand we need to slow down, fully agree. So my trick didn't work. However, there is something that I would love to cover with you, and that's something that Bill mentioned right in the beginning of this segment. So let's address the elephant in the room. Most L&D teams are measuring what's easy, not what matters. We count course completions because we can. So what can you advise to focus on while measuring learning strategies in 2025, 2026? So the nearest future, what is your approach to measuring impact of L&D strategies?
Just get in there and start experimenting as an L&D department with dashboards and LLMs to try to determine, are there measurements that we can get access to through AI that are just as good or even better in terms of application and performance measurement. To me, that's crucial. Because as we all know, completing a course does not mean we have mastered the material. Performance is a far better measure of knowledge acquisition and skill.
If you don't start any learning and development, AI or not, program, body of knowledge, tool, whatever it is, with business outcomes in mind, then you shouldn't start it.
Right.
I appreciate the need for other things and recognize that things like compliance and other are, perhaps like there's a risk associated with not doing it that is the business cost that we're avoiding. But at the end of the day, if there's not a business outcome in mind, why would we do that thing? To me, HR learning, my boss has this idea of our team being a profit center. And I love that concept because at the end of the day, we're all driving business outcomes. And whether it's an AI thing or not, we won't have jobs if we're not able to deliver those business results. And I imagine Jillian has a lot of thoughts on that as well. So I don't want to keep going, but if you don't have a business outcome in mind, you shouldn't do it.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, you have to show why it's valuable. And I think a lot of what I'm doing, because my team is kind of it's part of the HR operations, right?
Mhm.
And a lot of my team, what we're doing is going and talking to department heads of what would be development. Is there someone on your, give me an example of someone on your team who you'd love to kind of like up level, and what would that look like? So you start getting a really close to what success is for them. Because yeah, there is not a CTO I'm going to ask who's going to be like, if they complete, your security training, done. They're going to say, have they learned a new language? Have they converted something into revenue, sales enablement? Have they, closed more deals? And so
Is there more pipeline?
yes, more pipeline.
Yes.
All of that. Do they have more skill sets? Are they ahead of where we're going? I mean, also the company I'm at right now is a result of many acquisitions. So it's also like integration. Does people know each other? Like there's that element too. But you have to get with the executives and the business leaders and the goals and the revenue, and like the goal, L&D has to be directly related to that. Yeah, I remember bringing a participation rate earlier in my career to a CEO, and he was like, "So, like, did they like? What does that mean?" Like, he was like utterly mystified why I would bring that to him, and I really took that to heart. I'm like, okay, yeah, no, participation rate means you're getting the horse to the water. Now you have to measure how they drink.
Mhm.
Love
And,
it.
and that's a really good point. Senior leadership at the end of the day is far more concerned about performance. In my practice, it's revenue growth, but that comes from upskilling as well.
Right. Absolutely. And I love the analogy that you're bringing the horse to the pond. That was something that I've been thinking about. And it's kind of connected to what we started from the identity shift. Are we change managers? So just to give you a brief example, this year I was in Rome at the training conference, and there was a wonderful panel where we talked about the role of L&D professional in the future. And one of the directors had mentioned, well, we are expected to become change managers, but most of my employees, most of my teams are LMS administrators, and that's what they have performed their entire career. They
Mhm.
mostly have admin roles. So how do I expect them to become change managers? So what do you think of this aspect, profession-wise? What do we need to focus on personally? For me, it's been always, it relates to what Katie mentioned. Do we understand the business and what all of you
Mhm.
have talked through this session? Is there anything else that we should add to that list?
I think if L&D can think of themselves as change managers towards what we want to be, rather than
Mhm.
receivers of what happens. I think the best learning I've ever done was proactive. It always is, right? It's kind of like, getting me forward. And so I think if you are getting to a place where you're just receiving, you're just administration, you're going to fall behind. So it's how do you turn yourself into, okay, where do we want to go? And are we building what we need to get there? So changing into, because change is also always happening all the time. I love change management as if it's a period that we get to focus on. It isn't. So yeah. But what we can do is kind of change towards what we want to be.
There's definitely an aspirational piece, and it's ironic because the learning process itself is aspirational, but we as a profession, we've traditionally fallen back on completion and engagement measures, which completely deny the aspirational piece of what we want to be as an organization and where we're going. And the the cool thing about change management is it can get people excited not only about the direction of their organization, but their own personal journey.
Yes. And when you think about especially the need for having that why and that tie to the greater story or the greater whole or the greater good, I do not mean to sound in any way disparaging of the kind of like standard measures. Those exist. They will
Mhm.
always exist. There may
Yes.
always be a place where that is necessary. So I should have started by saying that part. But when I think about what I get excited about, driving change within the business and being able to help lead the charge and execute against those critical business imperatives, that's what really makes me get out of bed and say, this is awesome and I'm doing something great. And I think most of us need to feel like that about our jobs anyway. So
Hmm.
my hope would be that if somebody found themselves in kind of an administrative type role and we're thinking about how they could be different or what could change, those would be the things that I would look for that I got excited about. And then I would try to drive in that direction.
Right, absolutely. And on my behalf, completion rates also, at least in my perspective, exist. It's not just to make sure that the learner observes, perceives information, but it's also, when we talk about compliance, it's basically, a signature that, hey, we warned you. So there is a reason completion rates exist. Although there is a global company, I'm not gonna disclose the name because their leader has asked me not to, but they're up to the last year, the only measurement they have provided to their leadership was NPS.
Hmm.
So when we talk about driving change, adopting AI, providing access, are there any strategies to help organizations settle for more? Meaning that this kind of situation, the example with NPS, it was expected from them, right? That's why it continued for so long. So how can we show our value and shine light on providing access in the flow of work more than providing just another training, just another course?
I like the idea of course, giving people the information, but then especially with AI, giving people the ability to try it and do it and feel it and touch it and see it. Most adults, that's how they learn. There's, of course, a few exceptions for people who learn differently, which is always great. But a lot of learners that are adults find themselves in a situation where they're not going to really know it or feel good about it or move into that permanent, really having it and retaining it without getting to do it and try it and practice it. And to me, one of the most exciting applications of AI is those ability to be able to have a safe place to practice things, set up a rubric and let the AI tell you what you did or didn't do well, or what you did or didn't say. Like when you think about a sales pitch, nobody ever says things exactly the same, but did they say the core most important things that we're expecting them to deliver as a part of that message, for example, or a presentation even? Did they deliver against the key points that you were expecting them to? Little things like that where AI, I think, can really make a difference is just giving you a safe place to practice. It's scary. Practicing with your boss, of course, is awesome. And I love that my boss would be willing to coach and provide me with feedback, but I also don't want to look dumb in front of my boss, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if I could look dumb with AI instead and then be better with my boss, I would love that. So that to me is one of the most exciting places where I feel like AI is going to be such a game changer.
Yeah, I think multifaceted learning is also it. Like every company I've ever gone to, if they didn't have one, I'm like, we have to do a mentorship program immediately, right? Because there is that, yeah, you don't want to be, sometimes you don't want your boss to be your mentor. You need someone else to kind of ping things off of. And I think especially with new tools and with new technology and the adoption of them, talking to humans is a great way to be comfortable with it. So I think in addition to learning and then also AI enabling you to access dormant information, like we use Confluence and kind of like using their Rovo AI to find out what you need. All of these things I think we can't just think of it as one way. It has to be,
Yes.
the multiple ways you learn, because it's honestly how we all learn, right?
Hmm. And going back to a previous comment we had about AI being a work partner or a teammate, the AI is patient. AI doesn't judge you. AI learns with you, and the AI is always available. Whereas, that people are great. I love people, but sometimes they're not always available or in a mood to help you learn.
Yep.
Right. There is a lot of talk about AI coaching as well, and that's a whole other conversation. I think I've made a mistake and I should have booked 2 hours for us, so apologies for that. But lastly, I'm sure we've all heard this phrase, L&D catches up to technological advancement the last. This is the final department to implement new technology. So that's not always the case. Of course, that's not what I'm saying, but a lot of times it is. So as AI continues to reshape the workforce, Is L&D leading the access revolution, or just we are trying to catch up?
It depends on the organization. I see organizations where the L&D team is in catch-up mode, but that may be a legacy piece. The organizations where L&D is helping lead the charge, they're doing it not only with L&D governance, they're also doing it in a very cooperative way, because AI has the potential and it's actually breaking down silos in organizations where they're allowed to do that. And L&D can be a vital part of that.
Yeah, I would say being from the kind of broader HR space, AI in business right now is interestingly coming from not only the CIO, but the CHROs. It's a very interesting time because of the teammate aspect of it. So in that ways, I do think that this is an opportunity for L&D and HR in general to step forward, right? Take it on. And we are the ones that do it carefully with good amount of risk tolerance and all of that. But it's an opportunity for us to kind of like jump on.
I love that partnership and that cross-functional highlight there, because I think that's a really great call out. It isn't just one group or one area. And the other thing that seems to be happening a little bit is everybody's excited about it and kind of doing something, but we're not always coordinating together. So there's a great opportunity not only for L&D to be a part of that leadership, but to help link arms with others and all row in the same direction.
I think that's a brilliant note, inspiring one, I might add, to summarize our conversation with the Q&A session. So, dear audience, we've challenged some assumptions today. We've talked about identity, architecture, and impact, and now we would love to hear from you. Challenge us back. So what are your thoughts? Please feel free to use the Q&A feature of Zoom to drop off any questions that you might have. So, as we wait for the replies, I did have a feeling that we are sort of addressing elephant in the room. I know I mentioned that, but on every single question. I think there is a lot of questions that L&D experts are typically facing right now, and there is always this blurry, unpractical answer that, well, you know what are the most answers on LinkedIn per se. But what I loved about this conversation is that these are real practical expertise-backed replies, and for that I'm truly grateful to Jillian, Bill, and Katie. That's been, for me personally, I've received tons of information. Thank you for that. All right, we've got our first question. So Hamza, thank you for being here, is asking, do you think that being involved in the analysis process manually without heavily relying on AI can enrich the learning experience by offering deeper insights that might not emerge through AI-based analysis?
Now, there's certainly a role for sense making, which humans do far better than AI does. We understand context, we understand politics better than an AI does. There are pieces and many pieces where we have to be part of that loop and not only provide value, but learn how to provide that value in a sustainable and ongoing way.
Fantastic. Katie, you had something to add?
Well, I read somewhere that, and this is probably maybe not correct, so I'm not saying that this is grounded data, but like 40% of AI comes from Reddit. So of course, there should absolutely be validation and or even maybe side-by-side analysis, people versus not. So I think Hamza's question is a great one, and love the call out there to make sure that there is partnership or oversight or even separate analysis or parallel analysis going on.
Yeah. I go back to the audience for all of these insights is us. So we need somebody in there making sure that it makes sense, right? Because data, any data analysis, when you turn it into an insights, is a translation. It's an interpretation. So yeah.
Great call out.
Absolutely. All right. We have one more question from Anne, and here it is. So Gen Z and Gen Alpha are going to change L&D. How do we prepare? Now, personally, I have a lot of thoughts on generational theory. But yeah, go ahead.
You know, Gen Z and Alpha are already making those changes themselves, especially as they step into more opportunities for leadership in not only in the field, but in their organization. It's fascinating to watch as a consultant and as a practitioner, just how these generations are not only adopting AI, but asking good questions that we have been needing to face for a long time.
Speaking of mother of two alphas, they already asked me questions that blow my mind. And they the other thing is like they don't ask me sometimes. They're like, "Mom, can you put ChatGPT on? I have a question for them." And like that's the other thing. And then they'll talk to me to validate it. But that is fascinating to me. But they also come up with ideas of like that I'm just like, what? And then I have to take a moment and like digest it in the true generational like way. Like my son the other day asked me, "Do you think that, skateboards will have, chat GPT in the future?" And I'm like, why would, sure. Yeah. And he probably has a whole world going on there that could be an amazing business idea down the road. But like, that's what I mean is if we are open and curious with each generation across it, like that's really important.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for the wonderful question. And I know there is probably 15 more minutes that we could talk about, especially in this aspect. And thank you to our panelists, Katie, Bill, Jillian, for being so candid and practical. That's the most important of it today. So if you want to follow up with our panelists, their contact info is coming up on the next slide. And before we say goodbye, so bye to Jillian, Bill, and Katie. Again, thank you. But before we say goodbye, one more vital piece of information I'm happy to share with our audience. So judging on what we talked about, think about your organization's training for a moment. You put time, energy, resources into it, but how often does it actually stick? So worse, someone leaves, their expertise lives with them. And that's where Panopto comes in. Every training session, every meeting, every expert demo becomes searchable, reusable knowledge. You create it once, you share it everywhere, and AI-powered search delivers exactly what employees need the moment they need it. The benefits are clear. New hires get up to speed faster, no more lengthy onboarding cycles, managers spend less time repeating ad hoc training and freeing them to focus on higher value work. Compliance becomes simpler, and your team's performance scales without scaling your headcount. In short, Panopto doesn't just help your team learn, it preserves expertise, drives efficiency, and multiplies impact across your organization. Capture your team's knowledge before it walks out the door and make it instantly findable for everyone who needs it. Thank you so much for everyone being here and engaging so thoughtfully. If you want to learn more about Panopto, our team is here. And here's what we would want you to remember. The future of learning is already here. It's not evenly distributed yet, and it's our job for now to distribute it, to make knowledge accessible, findable, and useful when it matters most. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.